Every second counts. The scramble to get as many as possible out of Kabul before the deadline's up. There are harrowing scenes at the airport as it's reckoned 2,000 who've worked for the UK are yet to be airlifted. And what of the ordinary Afghan citizens left behind?
I'm counting my days and counting my hours. When is my turn to die?
Well, tonight there's a warning too from the US of the high risk of an ISIS attack in the capital, throwing added pressure on an already deadly situation. We'll get the latest on that from Rohit in Washington, also on News at 10. Why the days of shielding for clinically vulnerable children may be gone for good. We knew pressure on waiting lists was bad. We meet the woman who's been told it's 6 years before she'll get treated on the NHS.
Nobody should be waiting 6 years to find out, what it is when it takes a couple of minutes to examine someone.
Multi-story success. Dame Sarah wins her 15th gold and is on track for even more. And how a split-second wartime decision led to an amazing reunion between an old soldier and the children he saved.
This is ITV News at 10 with Julie Etchingham.
Good evening. Hopes of an airborne escape from Afghanistan for thousands of people are tonight hanging in the balance. According to the Pentagon, there are 10,000 inside the airport waiting to be flown out of the reach of the Taliban. But there are perhaps only 2 days left to rescue them. That's when American troops are due to start making their own exit before next Tuesday's deadline. Among those at the airport are nearly 2,000 interpreters, their families and other Afghan support staff who worked for British forces. They have cleared security checks but are still waiting in desperation and in dangerous and dirty conditions. America says 1,000 of its citizens are still in Afghanistan. The US Secretary of State said this evening that the Taliban had agreed that the evacuation of Americans and at-risk Afghans could continue after that Tuesday deadline.
No orderly retreat, no dignity in defeat. The West's exit ends with desperate people, some standing knee-deep in a sewage canal, besieging Kabul airport, beseeching guards to let them in. One British citizen, whose identity we are protecting, has twice tried and failed to get his children through this crush.
It was too much for us to handle. The kids started crying. One of them was my youngest was saying, have you brought us to die here? What are you doing? Take us back home. We don't want to be here. We don't want to do this. There's too much desperation.
Inside the perimeter, there is calm and order. But still too many people and not nearly enough time. Of Britain's 20-year mission, just days remain and every second counts.
We will try and maximise the window to get civilians out, the British nationals, the Afghan workers. In the last 24 hours, we've got 2,000 out, so we're going to use every hour and day that we have remaining.
The US deadline for withdrawal falls next Tuesday, but its troops will need 2 or 3 days to fly out, an operation that will need to begin by Sunday. 24 hours ahead of that, it's thought the last British troops will depart, and that leaves just tomorrow and Friday to complete the UK airlift. Kabul moves to a pace dictated by the Taliban, a race against time some are bound to lose, including those who have been our allies against the Islamists.
The very nature of the fact that we control inside the perimeter of the airfield and the Taliban effectively still controls outside means that not everyone we would wish to evacuate will be able to get through the Taliban checkpoints and into the airfield in time to catch one of the remaining evacuation flights. That's a sad reality.
Today, ITV News filmed this wreck of a building. It was once UK headquarters in Helmand province. The hospital is a ruin too. Much blood was spilt here in the cause of Afghanistan's future. The whole place has been destroyed by bombing, says Dr. Aziz Omar. We have no water. We don't even have doors. It is just one more calamity for this country. But those leaving and those left behind can no longer dream of what might have been. They can only worry about what comes next. John Ray, News at 10.
Well, for Afghans who haven't risked trying to make it to the airport, fear is rising. One woman we spoke to today, a charity worker and a journalist who has campaigned against the Taliban, believes it is now only a matter of days, even hours, before they come for her and kill her.
She has grown up in a world that allowed her to be educated and outspoken. Now this 22-year-old Afghan woman fears she's been abandoned.
I don't know what to do. My back is really... I have tried several organizations to get out of this country, but I didn't succeed yet. And I don't know what will happen next.
She doesn't want to reveal her name, but did give us a tour of the small room where she's been confined since the Taliban took control. Although she worked at a charity campaigning for citizens' rights, it's her work as a journalist she fears will condemn her in the eyes of the hardline Islamists now patrolling the streets of Kabul.
I have interviewed and I have joined several campaigns that made me familiar face, and I think they have already identified those like me who have been a voice before and who are a voice now.
With time running out to get on a flight to a new life, she knows the chances of escaping are slipping away.
No one can hear our voices. All the world have left us behind. The children of Afghanistan, the women of Afghanistan, the future of Afghanistan. And I'm counting my days and counting my hours. When is my turn to die?
All Afghan women face a grim future, but those who've broken the Taliban's strict code fear it could cost them their lives. Juliet Bremner, News at 10.
Well, tonight, the Foreign Office said there was a high threat of a terrorist attack in Afghanistan shortly after the American State Department gave more details about why it wants US troops out by Tuesday. The Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, warned of a possible attack by what he called ISIS-K. It is an Afghan offshoot of the so-called Islamic State, based mainly in Khorasan province, hence the K. Our global security editor, Rohit Katru, travelled to that part of eastern Afghanistan 3 years ago and tonight assesses the threat the group poses.
Our escort then was the Afghan National Army, disbanded now. 3 years ago they escorted us into the caves of eastern Afghanistan to see what they said was the remnants of a terrorist hideaway. Months earlier, on this spot, the United States dropped a bomb so powerful it's known as the mother of all bombs. President Trump said he was targeting ISIS Khorasan. One of its commanders told us they were cooperating with IS in Syria. Tonight, the US confirmed that it's the fear of this group which has forced it to stick to next Tuesday's timetable for withdrawal.
We're operating in a hostile environment in a city and country now controlled by the Taliban, with the very real possibility of an ISIS-K attack. We're taking every precaution, but this is very high risk.
But how high? ISIS-K is an offshoot of the Islamic State group, which once controlled large amounts of territory in Syria and Iraq. It's operated for 6 years, mostly in eastern Afghanistan, in an area called the Khorasan province. It's thought to have between 500 and 1,200 fighters and to have launched hundreds of attacks on civilians. And yet, just yesterday at the G7, many of America's allies, armed with the same intelligence, didn't believe the threat was great enough to prevent a delay to their withdrawal. The Taliban is the group's sworn enemy, a rival it doesn't think is extreme enough.
The enemy to it is not the United States or Western forces, but the Taliban itself.
Yeah, I mean, we tend to make this about ourselves a lot of times, and certainly one will be a means to the end. And clearly they'll get propaganda value out of attacking the Americans and saying, look, the Taliban cut a deal with the United States.
and the worst consequences could be for the Afghan people long after the Americans leave.
And Rohit joins us now, and it's clear, just as you say there, Rohit, that the jeopardy could hardly be greater for the Afghan people. But there is some news of cooperation with the Taliban tonight. What can you tell us?
Well, Julie, one of the great unanswered questions hanging over this entire withdrawal process was the question about whether the cooperation, the relative cooperation from the Taliban with other governments would continue after the withdrawal. Well, this afternoon we heard from German diplomats saying that they believed there was agreement from the Taliban to allow at-risk Afghans out after the 31st of August. Then tonight we heard from the American authorities saying that they believed Americans would be able to leave after the withdrawal as well. So for everyone, the door won't completely shut at midnight local time on Tuesday, the 31st of August. I think Western diplomats believe they have some leverage still over the Taliban, mainly through their ability to unfreeze funds available to it. But they also accept, too, that in reality, they cannot really judge their commitments, any of these commitments, frankly, until Wednesday morning at the very earliest.
OK, Rohit, an endlessly complex situation. Thank you very much indeed for that. On to other news now, and as one of the country's biggest trade unions, Unite protects the rights of nearly 1.5 million workers. It has also been known to influence, of course, the policies of the Labour Party. It did under the leadership of Len McCluskey anyway. But as of today, it has a new General Secretary in Sharon Graham. She's the first woman in the job. She says she wants the union to focus on the workplace, i.e. not Westminster politics.
My name is Sharon Graham and I'm standing to be General Secretary of Unite.
Not just standing, but winning one of the most powerful jobs in the land. General Secretary of a union with nearly 1.5 million members. She snatched victory in the race to replace Len McCluskey, the union boss who backed Jeremy Corbyn's leadership and recently warned Labour could go under with Keir Starmer at the helm. What seems to have resonated most with members is her focus on workplace issues.
We can keep depending on the politics while bosses pick our pockets, or we can come together in the workplace and stop them. When we do that, we can build the power to drive the politics, instead of politicians attempting to drive our union.
What do you think it says about where the Labour Party is that Unite members seem to have chosen someone who wasn't the centre candidate, wasn't the left-wing candidate?
I think it's significant that Sharon, as a woman candidate, was able to see off two male candidates. And I think it's great that she's now the General Secretary of Unite, the second largest union in the country.
Do you see this as the beginning, perhaps, of more unity within the party, the different wings coming together?
I think that journalists and the media like to exaggerate the extent to which the Labour Party is divided.
For Keir Starmer, it may at least bring some respite from the outright criticism he faced from Unite's previous leader. Today he tweeted his congratulations, saying, "I'm looking forward to working together to improve the lives of working people across the country." But what difference, if any, could it make to Labour's standing in the polls?
I would say, today, Keir Starmer, that's a kind of a good day in the office, but the wider strategic long-term challenges, of course, depend on can Keir Starmer increase Labour's electoral position.
Downplaying the politics, as Sharon Graham has done, and talking up workers' rights may yet help in that endeavour. Libby Vina, News at 10, Westminster.
Thousands of children in England and Wales with health conditions that meant they had to shield during lockdown won't have to if restrictions are reimposed. They will be taken off the shielding list. A study into the effects of the virus found that even those under 18s who are considered extremely vulnerable were at a really low risk of becoming seriously ill or dying.
6-year-old Juliette Amure Catalan was deemed extremely clinically vulnerable to infection by the family's paediatrician. Her mother, Anita, has kept her out of school for the past year and doesn't want her to return until she can be vaccinated against COVID. Today's decision by the Department of Health to remove all under 18s from the shielded patient list has left her fearful.
It seems very strange to me to then put children in this vulnerable situation and expect them to go back to school when they've known they've been very vulnerable for a year. I'm quite surprised to see them removing all shielding at a time when we are dealing with the Delta variant and we are going back to school with no measures in place to protect children.
But for the vast majority of children, say experts, the risk is minute.
I think the first thing to say is if you're really concerned, talk to your paediatrician. The data tell us that even for children that we would have assumed were very vulnerable to COVID, actually they're much more vulnerable to other things, and there are real harms in shielding. Even for children with life-threatening conditions, actually the chances of dying from something else that isn't COVID were about 65 times higher than dying from COVID.
Vaccines are available for children deemed at risk, but right now only for over 12s.
Studies are being done with the Pfizer vaccine and actually with other vaccines as well in younger children. And there may well be a relatively small number of children who will be at high risk, who will need to receive the vaccine. As to whether vaccine will need to be given more broadly to younger children, I think that's very much an open question.
It's little comfort for parents concerned about the risks of COVID. The balance of evidence tipping toward the benefits of participation in school and wider society and away from the potential harms of a new virus. Tom Clark, News at 10.
Well, after a punishing year and a half with coronavirus, hospitals are trying to make inroads into the 5 million plus waiting list in England alone. The Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, admitted to us the challenge is daunting, and that's before around 7 million people who would normally have got in touch with the NHS but haven't start coming forward with their medical complaints. As for how long some patients are having to wait, well, an investigation by ITV's Tonight programme has found one woman with rheumatism who can't get a hospital consultation for, wait for it, 6 years.
A couple of times I've nearly gone.
Phil Williams needs a hip replacement so badly he's struggling to walk. But during the pandemic, his operation was cancelled twice and he currently has no new date for surgery.
If you look at the state of my mobility, you think that's difficult. Imagine what it's like when I'm trying to support my wife who's a paraplegic in a wheelchair.
For his wife, Kath, who he cares for, the wait is agony too.
Kath, tell me what is the hardest thing for you?
Watching him suffer. Hearing him crying out when he takes a step and the bones catch.
NHS waiting lists are now the longest since records began. Even the Health Secretary admits things are going to get worse before they get better.
Do you feel daunted by the scale of the challenge?
Of course it is daunting. The work that we've done that suggests that waiting lists will grow, sadly, before they get better. And the reason for that, by the way, is because we estimate there's some 7 million people that in normal times would have come forward for help from the NHS, but they didn't. But now we want those people to come to the NHS.
What do you say to those people who are in pain, whose lives are really being blighted by this?
I would say that I understand, and I am doing, and this government is doing everything it can to increase the capacity, the ability of the NHS.
The problem is not confined to England either. In Belfast, Lisa Harker needed an appointment to see a rheumatologist.
So the letter says it'll be 6 years for an initial consultation appointment, and it also says that this is not expected to change in the near future. Nobody should be waiting 6 years to find out, what it is when it takes a couple of minutes to examine someone.
Many hospital trusts are innovating to try to reduce their backlog. Here in Croydon, they've created a hospital within a hospital, a ring-fence COVID-free zone that's helped their elective surgery go from standstill to 120%. NHS leaders say significant extra money will also be required.
The suggestion is it's probably somewhere between £2 and £3 billion a year for each of the next 2 or 3 years. So we are all looking at the spending review that is due in November, December, to see is that money forthcoming.
Meanwhile, there are millions in the same position as Phil who don't know when their wait will end.
When I get woken up at night with a pain, I'm led there in bed thinking about and worrying about. It's scary times. Scary.
And you can see Romilly's full report, NHS, the longest wait, tomorrow evening here on ITV at 7:30. Now, it is becoming a familiar story how a combination of coronavirus cases and a shortage of EU workers are affecting businesses. For Britain's vets, those problems are made worse by another consequence of COVID, a lockdown boom in pet ownership. There are now nearly 50% more dogs and cats than 18 months ago. One big chain of animal clinics says the perfect storm of more pets and fewer staff means even urgent care is being affected, never mind routine checks.
This is Bella. If you think she looks like she's had problems, her vet is going through a tough time too, with what some in the profession are now calling a staffing crisis. For worried owners, getting an appointment is not as easy as it should be.
There was something wrong with her eye, and when I had a look, it looked like she was blind. The vet that she's registered with were only doing telephone appointments, which was a bit pointless because she really needed to be seen by someone. And I couldn't get one anyway for like another week. I was just quite worried about, the complications of leaving it for so long.
Bella's story shows the problem. There's been an increase in pet ownership coinciding with a shortage of vets. And because it takes 5 years to train to be one, there seems to be no quick solution.
Good afternoon, Neighbourhood Vet. Eastenders speaking. How can I help?
At this busy surgery, there are often now longer wait times for routine appointments. Test results can take longer. The profession is short of vets and animal nurses.
We've seen millions more animals becoming pets in the past year due to the people having increased time at home. What we're also finding is due to Brexit that we're having decreased numbers of European vets working over here. So unfortunately, we're unable to meet that current demand for pet services. Also, COVID's got the inevitable impact with people having to self-isolate.
In 2019, around 95 vets a month were coming to the UK from the EU, but that's now dropped to 31. Meanwhile, the UK population of pet dogs has grown by 3 million to 12.5 million, and there are more cats too, up almost 5 million to 12.2 million. How does the video vet consultation work? What shall I do?
Oh, hi, Peggy.
5-month-old Peggy joined me for a video vet demonstration. Expect more of these remote consultations designed to make maximum use of vet time.
Obviously, it is very limited what we can diagnose, so it's more about peace of mind and determining whether they do need to be seen in person.
Many vets now fear that postponed vaccinations and delayed appointments could lead to a treatment time bomb building up. They're speaking out now to try to find solutions because those most affected by all this can't talk for themselves. Chris Choi, News at 10.
Day one of competition in the
studio
Paralympics
in
and
Singapore.
the British athletes got off to a flying start courtesy of the phenomenal Dame Sarah Story. She got gold at the first time of asking in the C5 3,000 metres individual pursuit. Phenomenal because she broke her own world record in qualifying at the age of 43 and because she now has 15 gold medals with a chance of more later. Her husband, who himself knows a thing or two about winning Paralympic gold, her children and her friends say they couldn't be prouder.
In her outstanding Paralympic career, and away they go.
She was the dominant force from the start. Just another day at the office for an athlete who's broken 76 world records across 4 decades.
That's a strong start. That is incredible, that.
Friends watched Dame Sarah Story in action from her hometown of Manchester.
Wow.
Oh my God. Her husband from their house in Cheshire. They witnessed the Great Dame storm to her 15th Paralympic victory. Her teammate Crystal Lane Wright simply no match.
And Dame Sarah Story is unstoppable.
I still don't fully understand how she has so much drive and motivation to still succeed and win as she does at the age of 43. It's just absolutely staggering.
She's just riding very close to that black line.
Sarah even smashed her own world record in qualifying and spoke to her daughter straight after the final.
As soon as she said, "Hello, Louisa," I was like, "Congratulations!"
Are you a little bit proud of her, Louisa?
1,000 times prouder than a little bit.
Sarah was born without a functioning left hand and was a swimming gold medalist first, only jumping on a bike in 2005. Those who've trained and competed with her are in awe.
She's a machine, she's just a pure athlete, and yeah, I think she just probably strike fear into all her competitors. And the pedigree she's got, you know, people are scared of her.
And they will be next week as well, when she'll defend 2 more titles to become Britain's most decorated Paralympian, with a focus that knows no bounds. Lucy Watson, News at 10, Manchester.
1,000 times proud, I love it. Now, Dame Sarah wasn't the only member of Paralympics GB in amongst the medals today. There were 4 silvers and 1 bronze, 6 medals in all. Not bad going for the first full day.
Away they go.
Things got off to a flying start in the velodrome this morning. A silver for Steve Bate and his guide Adam Duggleby meant that by breakfast time, Britain already had 3 medals in the bag.
And Steve Bates' Paralympic crown has gone.
But not totally content with second place, these 2 are already looking ahead to their next race.
We're super psyched now to just to press on and hopefully go one better.
But she recorded a personal best today.
A few minutes earlier, Crystal Lane Wright had also had to settle for silver, beaten for a second games running by her teammate and friend.
Just to be here in Tokyo, to actually get on the start line, and then to top it off with win the medal and making the final ride, yeah, it's amazing.
There was also success for Britain's swimmers. First Rhys Dunn,
so a silver medal,
and then Tully Kearney both won silver.
In the closing few metres!
Kearney agonisingly close to getting gold. Hers was Britain's 6th medal in just 1 day of action. And the good news is there are another 9 to go. Chloe Keedy, News at 10.
Now, it would have been big news if the England football captain Harry Kane had moved from Tottenham to Manchester City, but in an even bigger surprise, he has decided to stay put. Rumours about his future were swirling throughout England's campaign in the Euros, distracting him, some critics said. Today, he said he was staying at Spurs this summer. The transfer window closes in a week. He said he'd be 100% focused on achieving success for Spurs. I'm sure they're very happy to hear it. And finally, for a split second, a 20-year-old American soldier in Italy during the Second World War held his fire. He'd heard a noise from a wicker basket in what he thought was a deserted house and was about to shoot. But before 3 little faces appeared from under the blanket, the mother of the family threw herself in front of his submachine gun. 77 years later, thanks to the wonders of social media, the now 97-year-old Martin Adler found those 3 children and met them this week. They now have 6 children of their own, 8 great-grandchildren and 2 great-great-grandchildren, all of whom owe their existence to that split second.
77 years after Martin Adler came uncomfortably close to pulling his machine gun trigger, he's reunited with the family he so nearly shot. There is much to catch up on, not least reminiscing about that day in 1944 when the American feared his life was in danger from his enemy, the German army. Approaching a house, he heard a noise and raised his gun towards it. Suddenly, a young woman came running towards him.
She's put her stomach right against my gun, yelling, "Bambinis, Bambinis, Bambinis," pounding my chest.
The sound he'd heard came from 3 children aged just 3 to 6. The smiles in this photo taken back then tell nothing of the tense situation they'd all faced, perhaps because the American soldier had a treat for them.
Chocolate. He gave us chocolate. Blue and white wrapping paper. I remember it as if I was still holding them. We gathered so much of that chocolate.
I smiled. I loved them. And I was happy. And I wanted to kick myself in the behind to stop myself from shooting.
Martin's war memories are saved in an album, which his daughter used to track down those in the picture.
He didn't know where in Italy it was. He didn't remember their names. And I just said, you know, I'm going to see if I can find them. And I had a lot of help. But when he found out they were all alive and grandparents and great-grandparents, he was thrilled. He was so happy.
At 97, Martin still has nightmares about the war. But he has fond memories too. At last, he's been able to share them again with those he last saw as children. Rupert Evelyn, News at 10.
And that's it for tonight. Good night.